right, so Darren Urban is back from his road trip. Darren, what's the over-under on service fees you think you paid over the course of your trip between, the bag charge and the airline, maybe like a fuel charge? You got to the resort, your palatial resort. Of course, there's the onerous resort fee, other fees on your ride share.
Who cares, Paul? It's not his money.
Bothers me because I sent you a photo of what my view was outside my hotel window, and it most certainly was not a resort.
I'm sure there was an asphalt fee somewhere if you look closely.
I was on Southwest, no bag fees, and I didn't check a bag anyways. I was only gone for a blink of an eye.
That's well done. Well, that's unlike what the Cardinals are going to do to the rest of the NFL. Anyone who comes calling for pick number 4, there most definitely will be a QB surcharge, a handling fee, a processing fee, Danny. Retainer. What's the line from Good Will Hunting? Remember the Ben Affleck scene? Retainer. That was an all-time scene.
Yeah, I was going to say Danny has never heard of that
Come
either.
on. Good Will Hunting.
Never
Good
seen
Will
it.
Hunting. Okay. Anyway.
Paul said he'd never heard of Susanna Hoffs, everybody. He's older than I am.
Let's see. Academy Award-winning film or barely relevant.
Don't go there.
Band from the late 80s?
Early 80s.
Early 80s?
Mid 80s.
Okay. So there you go.
Right in your wheelhouse of when you would care about those things.
That's just my roundabout way of saying that if you're the New York Giants, if you're the Denver Broncos, if you're the Minnesota Vikings, Las Vegas Raiders, fill in the blank, yes, thou shalt expect to pay the quarterback surcharge for coming up to number 4. And oh, by the way, just to put it in real time as we launch here into Cardinals Underground, brought to you by Pacific Office Automation. Guess what? The LSU Pro Day is going on, and news that Jaden Daniels is going to meet with the Patriots, the Commanders, the Giants, the Vikings, the Broncos, and the Raiders. At least 3 of those teams are behind the Cardinals in the draft order.
You're right. This trade is absolutely a possibility, much to the chagrin of probably many, many people listening right now.
And based on, Darren, I know you love this, as to the the current market rate for quarterbacks as they stand right now, Danny, would you agree that J.J. McCarthy is QB rising and Drake Maye is QB falling to the point where Drake Maye might be available at 4 at this rate? And guess who supposedly, allegedly covets themselves Drake Maye? The former offensive coordinator for Josh Allen, who now happens to be the head coach in the New York Giants, Brian Daboll, who sees big Drake Maye as a Josh Allen clone.
I'm wondering if you're somehow secretly a part of J.J. McCarthy's team and you're, have this side gig of pumping him up before the draft and getting his name out there. It's possible, I guess. I could see McCarthy being one of the top 4 or 5 quarterbacks. I don't know if he goes at 3 before the Cardinals pick at 4. I guess that's possible. Either way, it's a good spot for the Cardinals to be in.
Do you think that Drake Maye is on the board when the Cardinals pick? Honestly. The answer is no. Okay. He will not be.
I didn't until Tom Pelissero.
Didn't even give him a chance to answer your own question.
Because there's only one answer.
I did not until, Darren, while you were at the owners' meetings, the league meetings, whatever they're calling those.
While you were vacationing in Florida.
Exactly, Darren. Guess what? Your competition, your network competition, Tom Pelissero, went on NFL Network, and to make sure I get this correct, I'm going to quote him directly here.
Sure.
Pelissero, when I've had conversations here with executives from other teams who know Adam Peters well, the new GM of Washington.
And who know that Tom Pelissero is on a megaphone of the NFL Network. Yes, go ahead.
No, the most popular answer for what the Commanders will do, as expected by his colleagues, at number 2 is J.J. McCarthy.
That's what they want you to think, Paul.
This doesn't come from Washington. This comes from the colleagues
you're
of
wrong.
Washington GM Adam Peters.
Read the first part about that again. Read it again. First part.
When I've had conversations here with execs from other teams who know Adam Peters well.
Know Adam Peters well. That's coming from Washington, yes? Or you're just guessing.
No.
You're pulling it out of your...
Well, no.
Out of your where, Darren?
Fanny perpendicular.
I'm reading that as those around Adam Peters, meaning other teams who are willing to speculate and project the sort of quarterback he would covet. And that ostensibly is J.J. McCarthy in the opinion of these other executives.
Let me tell you something, Paul.
I got to tweet out. I'm going to tweet out, Danny. I'm going to tweet out that Paul Calvisi, people close to him know that he desperately wants J.J. McCarthy to go in the top 4.
Paul, do you know that this happens every year? We talked about this after the Combine. This is the time of the year where everybody's names are going to get hyped up because they want you thinking about them. They want to rise their draft capital and make them seem like they have more people want, like the demand is higher than it is. And this is a great example of that. Who in their right mind, if you are an NFL exec, would go and honestly say the quarterback that you want to draft that high and start telling other people, knowing that it's going to get back to a network and be said on TV?
Or even if it doesn't, just having other teams know that.
No way.
I'm just answering your question, which was, do you expect Drake Maye to be available at 4? And I'm saying I didn't until this recent flurry of reports.
It's a smokescreen.
The answer is no.
Here's the thing, though, okay? And tell me if this is real or not. Mm-hmm. Can a J.J. McCarthy increase his stock and his standing and draft projection by, interviewing really well? By coming in and blowing away executives with his maturity, his work on the whiteboard, his understanding of offenses and where to go with the ball. And then when they dig a little bit deeper into his film, whereas you thought, okay, Michigan was a machine, the national champion. Oh, wait a minute. Give me a cut up of third and long situations and watch J.J. McCarthy decipher, diagnose, and deliver the ball with anticipation and accuracy, because I heard Joel Klatt say it. I heard Daniel Jeremiah say it. When you go back and you look at his film, and Joel Klatt said he worked 16 Michigan games over the last 3 years, saw the development, the improvement. So maybe all of a sudden these personnel evaluators in the NFL are seeing the same thing and going back and after doing further due diligence saying, hey, maybe J.J. McCarthy has better anticipation, accuracy, and ability to read a defense than a Drake Maye.
If that's the case, that's one thing. But to come to this conclusion for the sole fact that this is what somebody is saying on national television is not going to make me – that actually makes me believe it even less, given the time of year that it is, to be quite honest with you.
All right.
I'll be honest. If he's rising that kind of way, one – I'm thinking that whatever team is allowing that to happen has done a absolutely brutal job in their scouting department. That would be number one. And number two, I don't think that's what's really happening. I am a firm believer of the stuff that starts floating out in some ways is a combination of smokescreen and people finally catching up to what people really thought in the first place, which nobody really even knows. And I saw, I mean, you can do a lot of different stuff. I saw somebody who does the analytics of, it was essentially the college war, wins against replacement, whatever, of the skill players around the 4 top quarterbacks. And it was like something ridiculous. It was like, for Daniels and I think it was the three other ones that I saw besides Drake Maye were Daniels, Bo Nix, and McCarthy, and they all were like +4, +3, +5, and Drake Maye was like -3, which basically means he had the unbelievably crappy talent around him, and that also has to be looked into.
I mean,
Harbaugh with the Chargers said that McCarthy had the best pro day he's seen, right? I mean, wouldn't that be wild? Maybe, right?
Oh yeah, he laid it on thick. I have it right here.
Who said that?
Jim Harbaugh doubled down on J.J. McCarthy during his breakfast meeting.
Are you allowed to say that as an NFL coach at this point before the draft? Are you allowed to say that?
Well, the first thing I thought of, again, talking about self-serving, who is served more than the Chargers if we get another quarterback in the top 4?
Yes. Well,
so why are we believing him?
There's three. There's 3 things that are self-serving for Jim Harbaugh. Number 1, J.J. McCarthy. They have a relationship. His guy. He wants him to go as high as possible. Number 2, to your point, Darren, that yes, if J.J. McCarthy goes 4, then all of a sudden, guess what? Jim Harbaugh gets the best position player, non-quarterback, in the draft at 5, theoretically. And then number 3, guess what? If J.J. McCarthy does go really high, who does that reflect well on? His former college head coach who developed him, Jim Harbaugh. So, yes, there's a lot of wins in there for Jim Harbaugh. But, Danny, you're right. I mean, he said, and I'm quoting, I think he's the best quarterback in the draft. This is during the coaches' breakfast while you were with, JG and the NFC during the AFC session.
No,
said
the
that,
AFC session was separate.
Right.
I was in that room.
He says that J.J. McCarthy, has a killer comes out when adversity hits. And then he said, that was the best throwing day I've ever seen. That was the best I've ever seen a QB do at a pro day, which I threw out earlier.
With the planned routes and the receivers
Yes.
he's been working
Didn't
out with for
Jamarcus
months.
Russell have a
and-
great pro day?
The only quarterback, true or false, that I can remember flopping and actually hurting his stock at a pro day, Teddy Bridgewater. Once upon a time had a poor pro day,
Maybe.
and it took him out of the top 15, and he went in the latter part of the
I'll be honest.
first
I
round.
don't-
And you know,
we
so-
think that's because of the pro
Yeah.
day. It has nothing to do with the fact that he just wasn't that good. I'm sorry. I barely pay attention to pro days because I think teams, when they're meeting with those players around pro day, like if they have a meeting with them afterwards, I get that. But like, who gives a flying fig if what J.J. McCarthy is doing on air?
At that point, you have so much knowledge and insight on a player and seeing the game reps and the film there. If you're showing up to, really honestly at that point for Senior Bowl also or a pro day, it's more like icing on the cake of tying the bow on things you've done years of, looking into these players, that I don't think a pro day is going to make or break a player and where they land necessarily.
I could complete a bunch of passes on a pro day.
Could you?
That's not that hard.
I'm just throwing it out there
They
because
could only be about 20 yards max before I hurt my shoulder.
Maybe we should do our own pro day.
everybody wonders what the Arizona Cardinals are going to do at number 4, and Jim Harbaugh did say to the media that quarterbacks are going 1 through 4, and I tie that in as my segue because during that same session, what did Sean Payton tell the media? It's good to be Monti. So if you're sitting at number 4, and there are definitely more than 4 teams in need of a quarterback.
So you're not going with the Mike Tannenbaum that the Cardinals will take a quarterback at 4
And then trade Kyler Murray
and
to
trade
Minnesota.
Kyler Murray?
So let me just go on the
But
record.
which quarterback did he have the Cardinals taking? That's the best part, Darren.
It was J.J. McCarthy.
Hey, Paul.
Look, when I said and
Now we're talking about the kickbacks. Now the conspiracy theory is really coming in hard.
for 2 months I've gone with the hashtag let there be a 4th QB.
Yes, that's true.
In no way did I mean it in the context of the Cardinals drafting a quarterback. Okay, absolutely not. But to your point, Mike Tannenbaum. And the only reason that I'm even giving this any sort of coverage is because the man, once upon a time, ran a war room in the NFL. He is among the 0.001% of the world's population that was in charge of a war room. So for him to throw out there on one of the biggest platforms in media, ESPN, that come this draft season, that the Cardinals will go out and make those crazy moves. And, of course, it's not in front of me right now, but they will take J.J. McCarthy, number 4, and then deal from there.
And then say I think his stupid crazy trade was take McCarthy, trade Kyler in a 3rd for number 27. No, it was number 11. I think it was a number 11.
Here it is right here. Okay, you draft J.J. McCarthy at number 4. You trade Kyler and a 3rd-round pick to Minnesota for number 11.
Yeah.
Then you draft at number 11 Quinion Mitchell, the corner out of Toledo. And
Okay.
then at 27, you take Lad McConkey, the wide receiver out of Georgia. So, and I think you actually said this when we were on the Red Sea Report, and you blurred this out. Your immediate reaction was, so let me get this straight. Instead of Kyler and Marvin Harrison Jr., you end up with J.J. McCarthy and Lad McConkey.
I don't know if I said that or I just texted you that.
I don't
but
know,
I'm
whatever it was.
What? Speaking of, I mean,
But it was a good summation of the idiocy.
let's see here. We're going to take a show of hands for everybody listening. So, what would the Cardinal fan base right now do? A, if they trade out of 4 and don't take Marvin Harrison, have a pretty good idea how that's going to go.
I think they are warming up to that idea.
Maybe.
Depending on how low you can drop
More
and what you
importantly-
can still get.
But wait a minute, Malik Neighbors just ran a 4.35. Does that give you pause for thought?
More so in the sense if you do trade down to maybe 6 with New York, you feel more comfortable and confident in somebody other than Marvin Harrison Jr.
Okay, go ahead,
Sorry.
Darren.
Continue.
No, it's and then the other one would be you give up Marvin Harrison and Kyler Murray for J.J. McCarthy.
Riots.
Yes.
Riots.
And Lad McCarthy.
Yes, but you get the coveted rookie contract. You get the cap relief. of a rookie. You reset the
Well, first
quarterback
of all,
The
you
contract.
Cardinals aren't in a
clock.
position where they're pressed to have more
Let's
cap
make
space.
something
And
clear.
JJ's only 21, and Kyler's getting a little long in the tooth at 26. So you go with the young guy.
You wouldn't get cap relief at least for a couple years because you'd have enough dead Kyler cap that you would probably have to absorb a significant amount the next 2 years.
Also, we know
Stupid.
the pros of having younger players. We know that that's something that this staff likes in developing their own players. At some point, at some positions, especially in the area of where the Cardinals are in their transition phase, you need veteran experience. And I would absolutely prefer to have veteran experience at the quarterback position. A quarterback in Kyler Murray who showed significant strides in just playing 8 games, not having an offseason learning this new scheme, not working with his offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, out on the field the way that every other quarterback who's healthy was able to this past offseason with a new staff. And to come in and play the way that he did and grow the way we saw him grow in those 8 games and lead this team to success, maybe not wins every week. Philly was a good example, though, of just how the offense looked so much different when Kyler was out on the field. I would much rather still see Kyler out there with a full offseason and continue to see him grow and really see what he can do with this staff and put pieces around him rather than prioritizing a rookie deal on a quarterback when, again, it's not like a situation where the rest of the team on all sides of the ball are stacked with proven upper echelon, veterans at their positions. There's still a lot of areas the Cardinals are having to, again, move through a transition phase. I would rather have Kyler Murray as my quarterback than bring in a rookie and throw that on top of everything else they're trying to do with this transition year.
I want to go back to where you said that people were warming to the idea of not taking Marvin Harrison because those aren't the people I'm hearing from.
I've seen online there's been so much talk about the hypothetical trade with Minnesota. And I have seen not so much as going down to 11, but maybe like the Giants at 6 of if a quarterback is taken at 4 and it's really only the Chargers ahead of you to take a skill position player, do you feel confident enough still and maybe getting a Rome Odunze or a Malik Neighbors at 6 as opposed to getting Marvin Harrison Jr. and then you're getting more obviously from that trade with New York?
I could see how people would warm to that, but again, and we were talking about this off air, like I feel like we're heading down that road where we were a lot last year where it was like, the most obvious trade that the Cardinals are going to make is they're going to just flip-flop with the Colts at 4 and they're still going to get Will Anderson and they'll get an extra draft pick out of it and all be good, and that didn't work out. And that rarely does. And I think I could be wrong, but I'm finding it hard to believe that you're going to be able to flip-flop to 5 or 6 for whatever reason. And I know there's been some suggestions out there how that could happen, where you flip-flop with 5 with the Chargers or you flip-flop to 6 and you still get one of the top 3 wide receivers or even still Marvin Harrison. I think that's very pie in the sky right now.
2 things. One, I think it's a little different because Indianapolis viewed 4 quarterbacks in the draft. Right? They may not have gotten the one they coveted, but they were going to get one of those 4 quarterbacks.
I think they saw 3. They just realized no one was coming up to above 4 to get Anthony Richardson is what they saw.
So they were willing to take that risk, and they stayed at 4, whereas the Giants right now, I would say, are pretty convinced that, well, I mean, once again, Drake Maye has fallen in a lot of these mock drafts, but if you're the Giants and Drake Maye is there at 4, let's just say, and they want to come up a couple of spots, here's my question. What's a realistic haul? What's a realistic ask for the Arizona Cardinals to net in going from 4 to 6? Well, have we looked at that yet? Has anyone really taken a look? Forget all the ridiculous fan projections, right, which are usually unrealistic and greedy. But what would be a realistic haul to go from 4 to 6? You're going to go down 2 spots, and to Danny's point, still get one of the big 3 receivers, theoretically. Okay, in return for what? What would you get, a second-round pick to go down 2 spots from 4 to 6?
Yeah, I don't think you'd get a future first.
No, you wouldn't. I mean, I'm the Giants, I'm not doing that.
In this draft, and considering the Giants are in the top 10 of the draft, then you guess what? That's going to be a plug-and-play potential day one starter. Yeah, that's where you could get a starting center, a starting corner, a top round 2.
Here's the other thing. I don't disagree with you there. The thing that I think is missing when you keep talking about let there be 4 core QBs is you're assuming all these teams have all 4 of these quarterbacks as, I mean, all it takes is one of these teams or 2 of these teams or 3 of these teams to decide, okay, of those 4, we really like 3, and then those 3 that they really like are gone off the board, then they're not moving up. You shouldn't be moving up for the 4th QB you're not even sold on. This assumption that it's groupthink that every single quarterback needy team likes all 4 of these quarterbacks, I think is way too big of an assumption, and that obviously would change the market that you might have it for to trade.
All right, so Bucky Brooks, NFL.com. We'll just give you a couple more quick mock drafts, and then we'll go to the league meetings, which Darren covered in person. So Bucky Brooks 3.0 this week on NFL.com. Caleb Williams 1, Jaden Daniels 2 to Washington, J.J. McCarthy 3 to New England. Because, Danny, of course, Tom Brady calls Robert Kraft and says, take my Michigan guy, J.J. McCarthy, that whole connection. And then actually Bucky Brooks has the Cardinals staying at 4, taking Marvin Harrison Jr. I pause for the Red Sea to rejoice. And then Drake Maye falls to 11.
No way.
To Minnesota. That's what Bucky Brooks has.
11?
Matt Miller, on the day we record this, he comes out with Cardinals trade number 4 to Denver. As the Broncos come up, take J.J. McCarthy. Cardinals go to 12, Denver's pick. They take Brian Thomas Jr., which I could definitely see. Then the Cardinals net a 2025 first-round pick, a 2026 first-round pick, and then at 27 they take Graham Barton, the interior O-lineman from Duke.
The Cardinals would get Thomas, the wide receiver from LSU.
Yes.
To me, I don't. Is it realistic that Denver would give up a 2025 and a 2026 first?
Are they going with Jared Stidham and Ben DiNucci?
Oh, I'm just saying, like a 2025 first, sure, but I don't know that it'd be another first on top of that.
Well, but you do have the Broncos over a barrel in terms of...
Yes, that's true.
You either give us that or you don't. And I don't know what their second round... I don't know if they have a second round pick this year.
I don't think they do. I think they're still paying the price for the Russell Wilson for George Payton being the Seattle team MVP 2 years running.
The Broncos are interesting to me. Jeff Duncan, who has covered the Saints for forever and covered Sean Payton's entire tenure here, has made the point a couple of times that Sean Payton is the kind of guy that if he decides there's something he wants to do, especially in terms of quarterback, he'll move heaven and earth to get it done. So maybe that is something he would be willing to sacrifice. And the other thing, too, is if you're him and you think you're getting a quarterback you can win with, again, you might be talking about first-round picks in the 20s, not high. Now, I don't see the Broncos next year doing great things with J.J. McCarthy, but who knows?
All right, so
I would heavily consider that deal if that's what you're getting. For sure, I'd consider that.
So, well, okay, and look, this comes full circle back to Sean Payton saying, I think it's good to be Monty, and then Monty's response to you was about
well, Monty's response when I first said it to him, and he chuckled, and he goes, well, he wasn't around a couple days ago when we got back at 9:30 after a day at Disney and
that's right,
Universal.
But then he said, what did he say? It was nice of Sean to...
Oh, it was nice of Sean to recognize, I forget what the exact quote was, but I mean, again, Monty made the point, which I agree with, and this is something I definitely brought up in the Red Sea Report, which was it might be good to be Monty right now, but that's less about where the Cardinals are and more about what's happening in front of them. I mean, the only reason it is quote-unquote good to be Monty is because there are more than 3 teams that need quarterbacks, and you're assuming there's going to be this 4th quarterback. That's why it would be good to be Monty. And again, that's why I go back to I'm very curious about which 3 quarterbacks go early and what these teams that aren't in those top 3 end up liking about the other quarterbacks. I mean, there's been speculation, which we haven't even discussed, that the Patriots could trade out of 3 because they might like one of these other quarterbacks that aren't at the top, and move down, and maybe the Patriots trade with the Broncos and grab Bo Nix at 12.
Yeah.
The Cardinals would still win based on what we have seen with projections, though, of staying at 4.
I agree.
So I don't think it's the end of the world if now that obviously affects trade options, and if that's what you are hoping for is trading down a couple of spots to build that capital there, that would obviously affect that. But the Cardinals, in my mind, would still win if New England trades out, and you can stay at 4 and do whatever you want.
That's the thing. If the quote unquote worst case scenario for the Cardinals is staying at 4 and taking one of those top 3 receivers, maybe Marvin Harrison, I don't know, fans, then yeah, that's not a bad place to be at all. So maybe it is good to be Monti.
You know what's
I wouldn't have mind going to Universal and Disney. I don't mind that.
Well, look, what was it? 2 things about that whole Monti comment from Sean Payton. Number one, they're obviously on a first name basis. Don't know if they've ever worked together before, but it's interesting how Sean Payton says Monti.
Monti interviewed him, didn't he?
Last year.
Sean Payton interviewed with the Cardinals.
Yes,
to be
and Monti was already hired, was he not?
Was Monti in place when Sean Payton came in?
I didn't think they were looking at coaches before Monti got hired.
I'm pretty sure Monti was already hired.
Okay. All right. So maybe that. Okay. All right. So erase that from my conspiracy theories. The fact they're on a first name basis like that. But here's what's more telling to me is when Sean Payton said twice, quote, "I think it's realistic to go up and get a quarterback," and then double down on it and saying, "I don't know what the cost is yet, but that's not to say it's unrealistic to think we wouldn't trade up for a quarterback," meaning I'm guessing that enough teams are taking Monti seriously with the open for business neon sign that he has flashing over the Cardinals pick number 4, and they do believe a deal can be done.
Well, absolutely. Based on what we saw from last year in his first year as GM, making 2 trades right off the top in that first round to move down and then back up a couple of spots. Absolutely. I would think that teams would take that seriously. But again, when I hear that, it reminds me of what else would Sean Payton say, right? Like, of course they're going to want to make it seem like they are open for deals to see what is out there. Of course he's going to want to make it seem like, yes, we will do what it takes to get a quarterback. He's not going to say we're going to sit here at, where are they, 12 and
I guess my response would be, if he already knew the asking price was too high, then you would probably share that as maybe to send a message to the Cardinals, like, you better lower your asking demands. Also, maybe lower the expectations of your fan base. Because when you say that, you know how Broncos fans are thinking, oh, yeah, here we go. Just a matter of time. We got a trade brewing. We're going up into the top 5. We're going to get that franchise quarterback. So if I'm Sean Payton, I would pump the brakes on that unless I knew for sure it was doable, feasible, realistic.
I have 2 points to make on that. Number one, I don't think Sean Payton cares what the fan base is thinking. I don't know why you would, but I understand what you're saying. He does not strike me as somebody who really cares if that. And speaking of fans,
$18 million a year, probably not.
And then the other thing I keep thinking is, like, how many people are listening to this right now and, like, screaming at the top of their lungs to us, which we can't hear you because this is recorded. How much they don't want the Cardinals to trade this pick,
which is valid.
Guess what, people? Get your minds around it. That the pick is for sale, and if the price is met, it will be dealt.
If I had my bingo card, I think I might have just gotten bingo.
We'll have to look up when we get back to the other office.
By the way, can I just, before we get to the league meetings, can I just say maybe the most ridiculous thing about the Mike Tannenbaum mock draft is that he has the Arizona Cardinals picking J.J. McCarthy when everyone knows that they're taking Bo Nix, right? The CBS Sports mock draft from last month had the Cardinals at 27 taking Bo Nix. And then it was reported
I forgot about that.
By an online site that tracks all the reported visits that the Cardinals did use one of their combine meetings to visit 15 minutes with Bo Nix. Why would that happen? Why would you use one of your cherished, coveted interview slots at the combine to meet with Bo Nix?
Because that was before the trade to get Desmond Ridder. I don't know.
Maybe.
No, that's true. It was.
Maybe. Good point.
Not that you would draft Bo Nix in the first round to be a backup quarterback, but
Cody, get your nose out of the bingo card. Dang it!
That's that was my attempt to try and stir it up in the Bo Nix front, and Danny made a very good point, so it blows that out of the water, which means I'm going to move on now to the headlines from the league meetings. So I don't know what order you want to start, but I think we all in Cardinals Nation found it interesting that Jonathan Gannon said there will be a joint practice again this year.
Road trip.
An AFC team, a good AFC team is what he said.
Something tells me he wouldn't have said it was a bad AFC team.
Do you think we can request that the joint practice for what would be the first time in 3 years is somewhere that doesn't have an insane humidity?
Where would that be?
Jacksonville, Houston.
No.
Think about the good AFC teams that could be really bad.
Because
Miami.
we were in Nashville 2 years ago, and that was humid. And then Minnesota last year. I don't know how the players survived those practices, because even just standing there,
bucket hat.
I was drenched.
I mean, even the cattle in Minnesota were taking cover. It was that bad, okay? The farm reports said, look out.
Although I don't think Gannon is taking our weather preferences into consideration. So I'm just saying, hopefully it's not as humid.
Don't forget, this is a team that the Cardinals will have to play in the preseason, because that's how it works.
Right.
Chargers. I'm privately hoping for Chargers. Obviously, they don't fit the category. Oh, boy. Well, they used to do it out by the ocean.
Yeah, it was really great.
That would be nice.
UCSD, they used to do it
there anymore.
Now they're in Costa Mesa, I think.
And trust me, when they were in San Diego and we did a joint week of practices in the preseason, it's not quite as close enough to the ocean, and it was hotter than heck that day.
Yeah, it was pretty hot. That's when Mike McCoy was their head coach.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So there was that joint practice to be announced at a later date, although it sounds like it's already been arranged. They're going to be a pair of Christmas Day games, even though it's on a Wednesday.
I don't feel great about that.
Christmas Day doubleheader. I heard the commissioner, Roger Goodell, say that 3 of the top 10 rated regular season telecasts last year was the trio of Christmas Day games. So for everyone wondering, why would they do Christmas Day games on a Wednesday? That's why.
Well, Money talks.
We just talked off air, and Jim Alejandro's little daughter, what is she, 3 or 4 or 5? That's the first thing she does when
We're
she
not talking about 5-year-old Emily, because
NFL football.
I'm currently trailing 5-year-old Emily in the March Madness
who picked her picks based off mascots
challenge.
Yep. That's the first thing she does when she gets up Christmas morning, is wonder when kickoff is.
And if Christmas didn't fall on a Wednesday, if it were, a Sunday, a Monday, a Thursday, whatever that might be.
She skipped Tuesday. Did you notice that, Paul?
It's on a Wednesday this year.
Yeah,
so
it
now has to be whoever's playing on Christmas is going to play the Saturday before.
Correct.
So that it's the same time of playing a Sunday and a Thursday game. I understand this is a business and money talks. At some point, the players, the staff, not to bring us into it because the league doesn't care about us at all, you really don't have much of a life, which you sign up for during the season. To go out of your way to take probably the one holiday that people care about the most, because if you're traveling, you don't have Christmas Eve, and then you don't have Christmas, and even the players that are home, you don't have Christmas, besides if you have a night game, maybe a couple hours in the morning. I
heard they're both day games.
At what point is it it's not, even if it's not worth it, right? For the people that are actually playing the game. We
need to go back to the point where
it's all about money. I know that. This is me just saying that ugh.
As my wife reminds me, you're talking football. Deal with it, okay? Deal with everything else.
Yes, and I understand that of if we're working right, it's a job we love. I'm not sounding ungrateful in any aspect.
We're going to get tweeted at.
Honestly,
you guys are so lucky.
And I understand.
Honestly, I think you can blame COVID to some degree, because in 2020, there was an NFL game played on every single day of the week. By the time you got to the end of the season, they shoehorned in a game every single day of the week just to get every single game played.
And I see this more in the grand scheme of things trending towards making decisions that don't seem to have the player's best interest as top. It would be money 1A, players 1B is where I kind of see this trending towards, of adding more games or changing the days of the week or things. And we kind of talked about it last year when it was the league being able to change right? Like Monday night games or right, like last minute of the fans who have booked hotels and flights and all of that aspect of all these
collateral damage, if
yes,
you will.
Yes.
I mean, the reality is Wednesday is the last real bastion of why would they play that day. Every other day, like if you play on a Tuesday, which they don't play on a Tuesday, but if you were forced to, Christmas was on a Tuesday, and then you're playing the following Sunday, that's no different than playing on a Monday and then having to play on a, So, I mean.
Look, so that's a reality, and there is a possibility the Cardinals could be one of those Christmas Day
What makes you
teams.
say that?
Could be.
I'm going to say no.
Could be. They could also end up in Munich, theoretically still, could also end up in London because those opponents have not been announced.
Right,
Now,
because Minnesota plays in London
Yep.
and Carolina plays in Germany.
so I'm just throwing that out there because that's still on the radar to some degree.
Not Brazil.
Not Brazil, no, because you don't play the Eagles this year, and they're the host team, and it's already been reported that Browns or
Packers. One of the higher up guy in the Packers said it was between the Packers and the Browns.
So, and by the way, there will be 2 exclusive streaming games this year. The one from Brazil will be on Peacock. That'll be on Friday of week 1, which is a first in many decades, the NFL playing on a Friday night. So that's going to happen. And then Amazon Prime is going to stream a playoff game. So for the second straight year, there will be a playoff streamed exclusively telecast.
Are there more people yelling right now at this recording about that or about the Marvin Harrison trade?
Speaking of TV, in-season Hard Knocks will
It'll
now
be
focus.
it'll be cheers if it's Marvin Harrison playing in a playoff game and they're streaming on Amazon. So
That's fair.
In-season Hard Knocks will now focus on an entire division. Cardinals were there and did that 2 years ago.
this actually makes sense to me because as somebody who doesn't, and this is probably because I work for an NFL team, and so I don't always have the energy or desire to go home and watch more football if it's not my team. This makes a lot of sense for that reason of if it's not your team, how intrigued are you to watch a full season of Hard Knocks? Now, if it's a division and you're getting to get an inside look at your opponents and then also maybe a little bit of surprise of, I'm going to watch this episode because I want to see how much of the Cardinals is in it. That makes a lot of sense to me for them to do this.
See, to me, the biggest, there's 2 reasons that I think are the biggest reasons, and they wouldn't be that necessarily. One, I think teams are getting to the point where they don't want to give you as much stuff. So if you do 4 different teams instead of 1, you're not asking them to do. Now, I think you're also getting more surface level stuff when you're doing it this way, but I think that's what teams want. And then the other point of that would be if you do a whole division, you're not in a position like you were with the Cardinals where they were totally out of it by the time you started doing it. No matter what, you're going to have somebody in a playoff chase.
And when it's any year before of it's one team, they do have to give approval on things being shown, right? Because you can only show so much of the prep work that goes in terms of the X's and O's. It will be interesting if you're doing a division and you're playing a divisional opponent that week. What's getting approved? What exactly are you showing
that's a good point.
against a team that you face twice a year?
Yeah. I'm going to go back and watch All or Nothing because the first season, the one with the Cardinals, because that was done
All or
really
Nothing
well.
is good, yeah.
Well, you're right. Doing a whole division obviously guards against one team. The bottom falling out of their season, losing the franchise quarterback to injury, which happened to the Cardinals. And then all of a sudden it became the J.J. Watt reality TV show the last month of Hard Knocks. Who was the Hard Knocks in-season team last year? The fact I can't even remember or recall
not Miami?
it, I think
Miami.
says everything.
I think
Yes,
it was Miami.
Miami. You're right. Yep, it was. Absolutely. So there's that. And then
I didn't watch it.
I didn't either.
New trade deadline is going to be the Tuesday right now after the Week 9 games. It was previously after Week 8.
So now you're halfway
Okay.
through the season.
It's something a lot of the teams wanted, and the players actually campaigned for as well. Not sure how many people wanted to change to the kickoff rule, but it's coming. And it'll be spectacular in its change.
I can't wait till we
Splendicular
Let me ask you
to
this
hear
question.
from special teams coordinator Jeff Rogers on his thoughts on this.
Yes.
What did you? I assume by your reaction that you're not a fan, Paul.
Look, here's the deal, and I have the stat right here. A year ago, the kickoff return rate was the lowest since 1970.
Yeah,
Only
It's like
22%
Yeah.
of them were returned last year. So To say I'm not a fan, do I enjoy this format? No, but it is better than touchbacks. Did I like the way it was previously constructed? Sure. It was more the gladiator feel, guys running 35 yards down the field, high-speed collisions, great theater, great television. It's true spectator sport, but you rarely saw it. So you have to settle for something a little more realistic, and the NFL expects a 60% rate of kickoff returns based on what the XFL experienced 3-4 years ago.
Well, Darren, you were at meetings. Why don't you explain the changes for the kickoffs and then also onside kicks?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is essentially what you're going to have is on the majority of the kickoffs, most of the guys are going to be lined up. The kicking team is going to be on the plus 40. So they're going to be lined up on the 40-yard line of the receiving team, and the receiving team's blockers are going to be on their own 35. So they're going to be 5 yards apart. The kicker is still going to be kicking off from his own 35-yard line. And there's a landing zone between the goal line and the 20 where you have to put the ball without it being a touchback. The idea is to have the return, and you can't move those initial two lines, can't move until the ball either hits the ground in the landing zone or it's caught or touched by a player. The idea is you give the returner a chance to get the ball and get some momentum going before these guys start coming. You cut down on the massive high-speed collisions that cause injuries by having them so close together and coming from a start, but you're also letting the coverage team already be much closer to the return team. Now, there's still touchbacks. It comes out to the 30 if there's a touchback. So if you just feel like I'm not going to risk a return guy, then you can still boot it through the end zone. It comes to the 30. It takes out the onside kick until the fourth quarter. Because the way you're lined up, you can't onside kick it. So the way it is right now is for an onside kick, a team can only do 2 onside kicks a game. Better not get too far down. And you run it the same way that you have the last few years, which is balanced lines. But it's only in the fourth quarter. So and because there's no more surprise, like you'll never have the opening kickoff of the second half of the Super Bowl like the Saints did back in the day and recovering it and surprising the Colts. That cannot happen. That literally has not happened. But what really struck me with this rule, and I'm back and forth. I don't love it, but you're never going back to what it used to be, and I do miss the kickoffs. And one of the things that Darren Rizzi, the special teams coordinator of the Saints, made the point of in the press conference was the play was dying. If you don't change it, it was going to go away, period. So if you're sitting there saying, well, it's not football, that's fine, but the alternative was eventually going to be, and very soon, we're just going to put the ball on the 25-yard line and start the drive. There will be no kickoff. So if you want the kickoff, which special teams guys do, there had to be some kind of drastic move, and that's why they did what they did.
Hey, like a lot of things, a lot of industries in life adapt or die, and that's what they did. In fact, I heard there was an interview on NFL Network, the XFL executive who designed this whole thing. He said that the last time they used it full season, 2020, I believe, on over 400 kickoffs, they had 0 head injuries. So you know that stood out to
That's
Roger Goodell and
significant.
company.
Mm-hmm.
So because it was one of the most dangerous plays in football.
And they did say that the NFL rule is there are some Rizzi said significant differences. They didn't get into the tweaks of how it's different, but it is different than the XFL to a certain point. And the other thing to remember is this is a 1-year thing. This is like when they put in the rule to challenge pass interference. They're going to go back and look at it after 1 year and see how it is. Now, I personally think it's not going anywhere. They might tweak it going forward of some ways, but I think it's going to go, because the original idea was that the touchbacks would come out to the 35 to make it even more of a penalty to the kicking team to kick touchbacks, but they decided that was a little too much right now.
I'd be intrigued when we get a chance to hear from Jeff Rogers or from Jonathan Gannon or Monti Austinfort now that this rule's been put in place for this year, of how, if at all, does it affect the way you're going to construct your roster, right? If you're now 5 yards away, are you going to want a different build for, some of your special teams, or is that, you haven't really utilized?
The Steelers signed Cordarrelle Patterson yesterday, the Falcons free agent, who's always been a great kickoff returner. They signed him yesterday. a report came out that the agent was literally waiting for the high sign that the kickoff return team or kickoff rules were officially passed and new before the Steelers were willing to execute the deal. That's how much it changed that. Like, he wouldn't have gotten that deal with the Steelers if they hadn't changed the rules. I do think it's going to impact stuff.
Right, which begs the question of, was the signing of running back DJ Dallas, was that an anticipation of this? Is that maybe where their thought was of if your other returner was Greg Dortch, right? Was that something that at the time we didn't know and they were just anticipating this to get passed, and now you have your own Cordarrelle Patterson? Because
you know what? I think if nothing else, you want a bigger, thicker, heavier return man, because it's going to be more people in a tighter space.
Yeah, that's true.
In fact, I've heard some of the strategists say that, guess what? Special teams coordinators, they're going to have their profile enhanced greatly because there's much more strategy in this new format. You can have pin and pull. You can put offensive linemen out there. You can design it like a run play. It's really interesting what might be possible. And especially a Jeff Rodgers,
who's already got all kinds of plays in that
playbook. What did he say? He had over 100 onside kicks or whatever. He said that with the media this year. Like, what are you? And I'm like, he's serious. No, he's really serious. So I think it was trick plays or fourth down plays, whatever it was. So yes, he's a deep thinker with a high IQ on special teams. Very curious to see what he's going to brew up in the lab. And so that'll be very interesting. But look, if it's going to enhance the number of times that the ball is returned, which the NFL fully expects, and all of a sudden
they were saying if they had put the touchback at the 35, they were thinking you could have as many as 80% to 85% of kickoff return. Now he goes, because we put it at the 30, it might be more 60%, like you were mentioning, because if you get late in the season, you have some injuries, teams might just say, it's worth it for us to give them the ball at the 30 to prevent any kind of risk here. Or even if you have a really good returner. But, I mean, if you talk about a guy getting the ball with a full head of steam, catching it, and the guys that are trying to tackle him haven't moved yet, you've got some options as a returner.
Yeah. The other rule change was eliminating the swivel hip drop tackle, which Roger Goodell said resulted in 20 times the injury rate of a normal NFL play. So if you believe the analytics they advanced, hip drop tackle, swivel hip drop tackle happen on average one time per game. So it's not a radical.
No, see, that's not – no, what they –
There were like 200 and something times it occurred.
Yeah. And the injuries. Oh, I see.
And so,
well, the injuries were injuries that caused an injury that a guy missed time is what the one time. It wasn't that it was happening once. There were only injuries. It was injuries that caused guys to miss time. And the problem is they were serious injuries oftentimes.
Yes,
that's the big problem.
Because you're pulling down the runner or receiver and basically falling on their legs.
Yes, and Kenyon Drake put out a tweet. He broke his ankle or effed up his ankle in 21, he said, because of one of those things. Mark Andrews tore his ACL last year because of one of those. Look, I feel bad for defenders. I really do.
It's getting hard to be a defender.
It is getting harder, but I also think there's some ways around it. They went into how rugby players tackle because this was something they wanted to get out of rugby, and it can be done. I mean, you got to be willing to change. It's just, I don't agree with everything the league has done, but like Roger Goodell made the point, 5 years ago when they put in, you couldn't dead weight on the quarterback when you tackled them, and everybody was upset. And how do you even do that? And all this stuff. But he said the number of times it has happened has gone way down because players have figured it out. And the last point I want to make on the hip drop, because I saw a lot of very upset fans. Oh, something else they can yell at the thing about.
Well, J.J. Watt was upset.
He was. But this idea, look, in 2007 or whenever it was, or 2008, when they started going to defenseless receivers and you can't hit in the head. And I remember Steve Breston, Fitz would talk about it too, but Steve Breston's like, he hated the rule. He's like, he goes, don't tell defenders they can't. That's part of my gig. But you know what? Everybody figured it out. And same thing happened with the roughing the passer, and the same thing will happen here. And the other thing is I go, well, they're going to lose so many people watching. No, they're not. Nobody stopped watching football when they put in the defenseless receiver rule.
Right.
Nobody stopped watching football when they put on the body weight rule and tackling the quarterback. And they're not going to lose any fans because they're putting in the hip drop rule. It's just not going to happen.
Again, which brings me full circle. It happens approximately one time per game based on so it's not changing the game radically. You're not eliminating full speed tackling, full contact blocking. Come on, it's still football.
And the other thing is the likelihood is the vast majority of these things are going to be legislated through fines after the fact when they watch video and not penalty flags in real time. Yeah. I know the players hate that, but it's not going to impact the games in terms of outcomes, probably.
Now, I'll say this. You might get a flurry of flags in the preseason as they make it
to make their point
of emphasis. So if in doubt, throw the flag, especially in the preseason, to send a message. But we've seen that with a lot of other rules changes, right? It gets flagged incredibly in August, and then it sort of fades away when the games count. So, get ready for that. And so what else, Darren? Anything else from the NFL league meetings, that stood out that, only you would know because you were there and we were here? I mean,
how was the breakfast?
I had a lovely make your own poke bowl at the soiree on Monday night.
Wow.
That was quite delicious.
Oh, wait a minute. So there was a party Monday night? I did not know that. So there was the breakfast, but then there was also an evening event.
No wonder you wanted to go, Darren.
So the breakfast is literally like a buffet line when the coaches come in, and you can get food right before or right after. Coaches, in theory, could do it too, but they usually don't have much interest in hanging around with the reporters. It used to be, the breakfast used to be literally like, it was an hour. You got an hour with coaches, and like literally the coaches would get food, the reporters would get food. You'd sit at this table and you just kind of talk for this hour. It's become much more of it's now only a half hour with the coaches.
Formal press conference.
It's more of a much more formal situation. The Monday night party, it's basically for the media happened to get invited to this thing, but it's basically for all the owners and their families and everything. We just get to go and hang out there.
I see.
But it's not bad. It's not a bad thing. I was only there for a couple hours.
Maybe we should send Paul instead of Darren next year. Let Paul experience the parties.
Sure. Why not? I mean, I was there for the Gwen Stefani, Blake Shelton. That was a couple of years ago when the Super Bowl was in town, so that was big time. That was, I think the wife definitely enjoyed that a lot more than yours truly. She was in her glory.
That's just because you're so high up in this organization.
Well, Paul. It's you're right. It's just routine for me at this point. And then, of course, the whole thing started with the coach's photo, which Jonathan Gannon got a lot of good positive press from Kyle Brandt, who performance theater basically, and breaking that down.
Good Morning Football.
Yes.
Yeah. Every year, Kyle Brandt on Good Morning Football, quote unquote, breaks down the coach's photo and basically goes through every single coach and finds something to talk about. And he talked about JG's biceps, which in the picture were impressive, I have to say.
I mean, first team all fitness center in the hotel. That's boom. He needs to throw that in his little bio on azcardinals.com.
I think he also pointed out the fact that he wasn't wearing socks. I think Kyle Brandt was saying that like he liked the style.
Oh yeah, there was a couple coaches that he talked about not having socks.
I could be wrong, but as I was walking through to fill up my water at the other facility this morning, and Good Morning Football was on the TV, that I think that Brandt had said he made Gannon his winner of the coach's photo.
Oh, I missed that.
That's good.
So
I missed that.
Well, he's definitely winning the offseason with his fitness routine. There's no doubt about it, Coach.
It's not a routine; it's a lifestyle.
I see. No, you're right. Yeah. By the way,
he was that way before he ever got here.
Sean McDermott might want to address his best practices because it was pointed out he's worn the same dark blue blazer 6 years in a row. Did you see the montage of Sean McDermott?
No.
And the first 2 years in the series of pictures, it was the same shirt with the same blazer.
Are we sure Andy Reid isn't wearing the same Hawaii shirt every year?
Well, okay, and he dispelled that notion, that conspiracy theory, and he threw up a montage, and it's the same sort of Hawaiian shirt, but it has been different colors and a different shirt and a different pattern every single year. But yes, the same motif, if you will. So but that is always great theater, and that's a singular thing that Kyle Brandt does. One of many singular things.
Yeah,
so,
I would say.
As we talked about with Craig Grigalu to start this week, I'm not sure what NFL Network has in mind with Good Morning Football. But why mess with something that is so successful?
They're moving to L.A., right? Their studio?
Because it's too expensive, Paul.
Too expensive in New York? Is that what it is? The New York studio?
Are they all moving to L.A.?
They're all moving to the the studio
That's
right
true.
across
If you have a
from the
state,
Rays.
From
They-
SoFi?
if you have an existing
They already
state-of-the-art
have an
studio in
they're,
LA,
They're renting
yeah.
what they got in New York.
Gotcha.
They can all go to LA, and they've already got a studio.
The lease is up, and you can cut costs.
Yep.
I get it. Okay, all right.
Didn't we talk about business earlier
Here's-
in this podcast?
Here's the
Money
problem,
talks.
though. When they first launched Good Morning Football, it was on the West Coast, which means the people working Good Morning Football get up at like
Early.
midnight.
Yeah.
And
That's like
so-
working in a newsroom.
Yes.
Like the early
Yes.
shift.
So, I mean, there's morning radio, and then there's morning TV. And because of TV, you have to get in even earlier. So, as someone who
Because you
did
got to look good, Paul.
Yeah, it's, I mean, God.
Susanna Hoffs knows all about that.
I mean,
Golly.
you know, Dani, I mean, for the female anchors doing morning TV, you are up at like 11 o'clock at night.
Yes, when I was in college and I had a broadcast class and I took it over the summer for this reason of having to work the morning show. So I had to be at the station by probably 2 a.m. to like fill everything out, right? Make sure my scripts were good to go, to then get my gear and head out to wherever I was doing my live report from. I literally would wake up at midnight. I would have my roommates coming home from the bar,
Wait,
and
were
I
you-
would be waking
Yeah.
up after like 4 hours of sleep to get ready.
Was this for the Mizzou station, or was this for like a local station?
At Mizzou, you work for an NBC affiliate, so it's a legitimate NBC station.
And you will be bringing in the B-roll for the next week's podcast?
Heck no, I will not.
Come on.
I'm hoping that doesn't exist anywhere. I don't think I have footage.
I am
really
so
have to dig
Googling
deep.
when we're done here.
No. Please don't.
Yeah. All right. So, what else? The only other thing I'll throw out there is, once
Isn't
again,
this enough, Paul?
if I can reiterate one thing,
we've
just
given and we've
please, Red Sea, the whole Marvin Harrison Jr. thing. You realize, I'll just leave this, that some fans, and you know who you are, fans, have been calling the front desk at Cardinals headquarters
No
What?
way.
and demanding the Cardinals draft Marvin Harrison Jr.
What?
Some fans have been calling, requesting to talk to Monti Ossenfort directly.
Wow, the dedication.
One fan, I'm told, called and wanted to talk to Kyler. People, once
Get in
again,
line.
you just can't call an
Kyler's
NFL
hard
facility
to reach.
and ask to have the franchise quarterback put on the line. Okay, that's not the way it works.
Wow.
So,
Look, you appreciate the passion, the dedication.
yes, I do.
will say
yeah.
you're not going to get through to the
Yes.
people you need to get through if you're calling the front desk.
And poor Marie up front, the nicest person on the face of
Nicest
the earth.
person.
And she's got to deal with fans repeatedly sharing their opinions, I'll be kind, as to where the Cardinals should go with number 4 in the draft.
We all got them.
I will say I used to get some of those phone calls when I worked at the like the training facility in college. I worked at like the football office, and I would sit at the front desk, and some of the phone calls I would get would be similar sentiments.
Actually, you know what? Light bulb. Calvisi Consulting says we ought to throw a few of us up there to field some of those calls and then turn it into a little social media type video. What do you think about that?
You are social media savvy, Paul.
Maybe
so why don't you kick us off?
What about starting a phone bank, like a telethon? We'll start a phone bank and we'll field fans' calls. We'll record them and put together a little montage.
How many employees do you think would even know how to use a landline phone for a
right. Yeah.
telethon, Paul?
Yeah, that's true. Is anybody associated with this production have a landline still? Anyone?
Not anymore.
We tried to get rid of ours, and Cox said okay, and then it still rings every once in a while. We're not
Really?
paying for it, so I don't know.
Interesting. I still remember the phone number for my parents' landline, but they haven't had that in 10 years.
Okay. All right. So once again, please refrain from calling the phone bank and the main number with any sort of draft advice. Save it for Darren's mailbag.
Yeah, or just tweet at Paul.
Yes, yes. And that'll do it for this edition of Cardinals Underground, brought to you by Pacific Office Automation.